My name is Noah Bennett. For years ago, I died. At least, that's what the records say. What actually happened is a little more complicated. I was on my way home from a job in Sedona, Arizona, a contracting gig that was supposed to last 3 days and ended up stretching into 6. I'd called Amber the night before to let her know I'd be driving through Flagstaff early in the morning. I remember her voice sounding distant, tired, like she was somewhere else. I figured it was just the stress of the season. Her work got crazy in the fall. Tax clients, year-end books. We both had our rhythms. We'd always met in the middle. That morning, I hit the road early, trying to make it home by lunchtime. The sun was barely up. I remember the highway stretching out in front of me like a ribbon through the desert, red rocks catching the first pink light of day. Then suddenly, a truck swerved into my lane. No honk, no attempt to correct. Just a looming wall of steel barreling straight at me. I reacted on instinct, jerked the wheel hard right, tires screaming. The shoulder disappeared and my truck went off the edge. I felt the world tilt. Gravel. Sky. Trees. A sickening drop. Then, darkness. When I came to, everything hurt. My mouth, my legs, my hands. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. There were voices around me, clipped and urgent, like radio static filtered through a dream. I caught phrases, no ID, third-degree burns, unconscious, lucky to be alive. And then it all went black again. I spent 5 weeks in a coma. When I woke, I was in a long, quiet room with machines humming like distant bees. A nurse sat beside me, reading a book. When she looked up and saw my eyes open, she smiled like she'd been waiting years. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. I couldn't form words. Couldn't ask where I was. Couldn't ask about Amber. In the weeks that followed, I learned just how far I'd fallen. I'd been airlifted to a hospital near Santa Fe. My truck had been crushed in the ravine and I was barely recognizable. No wallet, no phone, nothing that could identify me. The fire had melted most of what I had on me. They'd even speculated I might be a drifter, someone with no home, no family. But I remembered. Not everything, not all at once. But faces, names, smells, those came back like waves crashing through a fog. Amber's laugh. Her perfume. The chipped mug she always used for coffee. The sound of her keys when she came through the front door. I remembered her house. Our routines. Her habit of leaving post-it notes on the bathroom mirror, even for the dumbest reasons. Buy toothpaste. Love you, don't forget trash day. It all came back while I lay in bed, skin grafts healing, muscles slowly returning to life. My face was different now. The reconstructive surgeries had been extensive. Titanium plates in my jaw, skin grafts across my cheek and neck, cartilage reshaped and repositioned. They showed me photos of my injuries. I wish they hadn't. I didn't recognize the man in those images. I looked like a shell. A burned-out husk. Eventually, they gave me a mirror. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't look like Noah Bennett anymore. Not really. But I still felt like him. Deep down, under the swelling and scars and new lines, he was still there, angry, confused, and very, very alive. The rehab center became my world. I learned to walk again, starting with 1 foot in front of the other down cold tile hallways. My speech returned, slowly, first sounds, then sentences. Nobody knew who I was and I didn't know how to prove it. Amber hadn't filed a missing person report. My name wasn't in any databases they searched. Maybe I hadn't even been reported missing. Maybe no one was looking. That hurt more than anything. A therapist tried to comfort me. Sometimes people move on, she said, like she was explaining gravity. Grief takes many forms. You've had a unique trauma. I nodded, but deep down something felt off. Amber wouldn't just move on. She was stubborn in love, stubborn in life. At least, she used to be. Eventually, I was able to contact a nonprofit that helped unidentified patients apply for new documentation. They worked with me to establish a new identity since mine, for all legal purposes, no longer existed. It felt strange starting over like this. Like erasing a name from a gravestone and carving a new one in its place. When I finally walked out of that facility, I had a new name on paper. But inside, I was still Noah. Still me. And I knew exactly where I was going. Home. The Colorado mountain town Amber and I had lived in wasn't large, just under 20,000 people, tucked between 2 ridges with winding roads and dense forests. The kind of place where everyone smiled at the grocery store and left their keys in the ignition. The kind of place you build a life if you want things to feel permanent. I took a bus most of the way. It was the cheapest option and I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I wore a hat low over my face, stuck to corners, and kept my new ID in a zippered pocket where it couldn't get lost. I didn't know what I expected to find. Maybe Amber would see me and collapse into my arms. Maybe she'd scream. Maybe she'd laugh. I didn't know. All I knew was I had to see her. When I stepped off the final bus and walked down Main Street, nothing had changed, and yet everything felt foreign. The shops were the same. The sidewalks. Even the old bell on the church corner still rang on the hour. But I was the outsider now. A shadow passing through his own memories. And then I saw it. Right in the window of Peterson and Gray Real Estate, taped behind the glass like a badge of pride, a photo. Amber. Standing in front of a craftsman-style house. Her arms around someone. A man. Tall, sandy hair. I stepped closer. Blake. My best friend. The guy I used to go hiking with. The guy who helped me move furniture on Sundays and taught me how to grill the perfect steak. The guy who stood beside me at my wedding. His arm was wrapped around Amber's waist. They were both smiling. Behind them, the words "happiness after tragedy" scrawled across a decorative sign hanging above the door. I stood there for I don't know how long. Just staring. The reflection of my new face in the glass beside their smiles. Tragedy. That's what they were calling it. And just like that, I knew. Amber wasn't waiting for me. She hadn't filed a report. She hadn't grieved. She had built a new life with him. I stepped away from the window slowly, my legs heavy, breath stuck somewhere between my lungs and my throat. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. In the quiet of that motel room, curtains drawn, walls thin, a musty heater rattling like it hadn't worked properly since the 90s, I started going back. Not physically, but in my head. Revisiting every conversation, every odd silence, every late night that ended with a flimsy excuse and a half-hearted kiss on the cheek. I used to think love was something you could feel even when it was cracking at the edges. That maybe if you loved hard enough, it could patch the holes before they swallowed everything. I clung to that. For years. Now all I could do was replay it. The month before the accident had been off. I remember that now. I didn't want to believe it then, told myself it was just stress, just work, just life being life. Amber had been different. Colder. Or maybe just distracted. She started staying late at the office more often than usual. Quarterly crunch, she said. Karen's out sick, I have to pick up the slack. The first time she said it, I believed her. The third time, I started checking the clock when she texted. The sixth time, she didn't text at all. She turned off location tracking on her phone. That used to be something we joked about, how I check hers during hikes to see how far ahead she was. One night, it was just gone. She said her battery was dying, or maybe she'd switched settings by accident. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be that guy. Suspicious. Paranoid. Controlling. But I noticed. I noticed how she flinched when I asked who she was texting. How she'd tilt the screen just slightly away from me on the couch. How she laughed less when I was in the room. How she started putting on makeup to work from home. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining things. That we all get distant sometimes. That she was tired. That I was tired. Back then, the thought of Amber being unfaithful never truly took root in my mind. She'd always been the rock. The one who kept things running when I buried myself in work. The one who made plans, remembered anniversaries, packed snacks for road trips, sent me photos of her lunch just to make me laugh. I didn't see the cracks forming. Or maybe I did, but I pretended they weren't there because the alternative was too painful to imagine. But now that I'd seen the photo of her and Blake, that fog was gone. And the past looked different in the rearview mirror. Everything made sense now. She wasn't just getting distant. She was already gone. I found a cheap room at an old roadside motel just a few miles outside town. It was the same one we used to joke about whenever we passed it on weekend drives. Who would ever stay there? She'd laugh, her hand resting on my knee as we cruised past. The irony wasn't lost on me now. The place hadn't changed. Still had the faded yellow vacancy sign and the cracked pavement in the parking lot. The front desk clerk didn't ask questions when I paid cash. I didn't give my real name. Inside, the room smelled like mothballs and detergent. The bed was lumpy and the TV only picked up 2 channels. But it was quiet. And most importantly, it was anonymous. Nobody recognized me. It was one of the only advantages of waking up with a new face. I looked like a stranger. Sounded like a stranger. Even my walk was different now, slower, more cautious. Like my body was always preparing for the next impact. I spent the first few days in silence. Just watching. Listening. Trying not to spiral. The clinic back in Santa Fe had helped me file for some basic benefits before I left. Since I had no documented past, I was technically an accident survivor with no known identity. They helped me apply for a small emergency insurance grant and transition assistance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep a roof over my head and food in my stomach. I supplemented the rest with odd jobs. A day here, a day there, electrical wiring for a construction site, stacking pallets for a local warehouse, replacing old fixtures in rental cabins up in the hills. Manual work, the kind that kept your hands busy and your thoughts temporarily quiet. I told people I was new in town. Said I was looking for a fresh start after a long recovery. People nodded and smiled. No one pried. Small towns like this, people prefer polite distance unless you give them a reason to close the gap. I avoided the places Amber and I used to go together. The bookstore with the creaky floors. The little artisan bakery that sold overpriced macaroons she couldn't resist. I steered clear of them all. Except one. There was a diner near the edge of town where we used to have breakfast every Saturday, 2 eggs, toast, and a shared plate of pancakes. We always sat at the window, same booth. It was Amber's favorite ritual. I went back just once to see if she still did it. She wasn't there. But the waitress remembered her. I didn't introduce myself. Just asked casually if a redhead named Amber still came by. The woman raised an eyebrow. You mean Amber Blake? Yeah. She and her husband come in once or twice a month now. Sweet couple. You know them. Amber Blake. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Married. She was using his last name now. The waitress leaned against the counter. Terrible what happened to her first husband. She said he just disappeared. Didn't leave a note, nothing? Told me he had a breakdown or something. Walked out on her. Real shame. My hands went numb. I forced a smile and nodded like it didn't gut me to hear those words. Walked out on her. Unstable. Just vanished. She didn't just leave me. She buried me. She crafted a story so no one would come looking. A version of me that was broken, selfish, and emotionally unwell. A man who crumbled and ran away in the night. So she wouldn't have to explain. So she could mourn on paper and move on in real life. And everyone bought it. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood until then. Amber didn't lose me in that crash. She used it. She didn't search for me. Didn't file a report. Didn't call hospitals or follow up when I didn't come home. She saw a chance to start over and she took it. She didn't just believe I was dead. She needed me to be. It's strange what your mind does when the truth finally sets in. For weeks, I'd lived like a ghost. Watching from the shadows. Existing just outside the frame of the life that used to be mine. But the moment I heard Amber's new last name, Blake, something shifted. I didn't feel pain. Not at first. What I felt was clarity. Like someone wiped the fog from a mirror and showed me exactly what I didn't want to see, but needed to. And what I saw was this: Amber and Blake had planned everything. Or at the very least, they had wasted no time in capitalizing on my absence. So I started digging. At first, I wasn't sure how much I'd be able to find. But you'd be surprised what's still public, even in a quiet town like ours. I began at the courthouse, just walked in like any ordinary guy off the street. Nobody knew me. That was the gift and curse of being unrecognizable. I said I was researching a property for purchase and needed to look through some past ownership records. The clerk handed over the public registry logbook, bored and unbothered. And there it was, Amber's signature, dated 1 week after my presumed death certificate was issued. She sold our business. Our business. We built that photography studio from nothing. Weekends spent designing brochures, late nights editing, setting up our website, dreaming about expanding into weddings and corporate gigs. And with one stroke of a pen, she erased it all. Liquidated the account, signed the closing documents, and transferred the final balance to a joint bank account with Blake as the co-signee. I felt sick. But I wasn't done. Back at the motel, I requested the archived public death notice from the local paper's website. I had to use my new ID and a burner email address, but eventually I got the file, a short, elegant obituary. Noah Bennett, loving husband and creative spirit, presumed deceased following a tragic vehicle accident. Gone, but never forgotten. The words felt like a slap. I was reading my own funeral. And beneath it, a link to a GoFundMe started by Amber. Her profile photo showed her smiling with tear-streaked eyes. The caption read, "Help a widow rebuild after devastating loss." It had raised over $40,000. I clicked the comments. "So sorry for your loss. He was a good man. Can't believe he's gone. We're here for you." I slammed the laptop shut. Every keystroke was another nail in a coffin I was never meant to crawl out of. But it was the insurance records that broke me. I'd assumed she'd received something. Amber was listed as my emergency contact, my beneficiary. I'd set that up years ago and never thought twice about it. But now, with my death declared official, she had full access. I found confirmation through an insurance agency website. With my new ID and some creative phone work, I was able to get a copy of the case summary. Payout, $400,000. Claim finalized, 6 weeks after my death. Initiated, 4 days after the accident. For days, she hadn't even waited a week before submitting paperwork. That was the moment I stopped hoping for redemption. That was when I knew she hadn't just moved on. She'd cashed out. And Blake, the man who was supposed to be my friend, he hadn't hesitated either. He helped her close the studio. They moved 2 hours north, opened a new business, a family-run lifestyle photography shop in Jackson, Wyoming. The irony was laughable. Family-run. A perfect little fairy tale carved out of the ashes of someone else's life. But I wasn't dead. And now they'd know it. The motel had a coin-operated printer in the lobby. I printed a photo, black and white, slightly grainy, just enough to look like it was snapped on a whim. It showed me sitting on a park bench, reading the day's newspaper. I picked the park on purpose, one Blake used to frequent for morning jogs. In the background, you could clearly see the statue in the center of town, with the date on the paper visible if you looked closely. I slipped the photo into a plain envelope and wrote just one word on the outside in block letters. Remember. Then I drove to their house. The same house from the photo in the real estate office. It was on a quiet street, tree-lined, new siding, one of those developments where every lawn is perfectly manicured and the mailboxes match. I parked a block away, walked the rest of the distance, and paused when I reached the front gate. There were new flower pots on the porch, bright blue ceramic, just like the ones Amber used to point out in catalogs but said were too expensive. A white SUV sat in the driveway. A child's tricycle leaned against the side of the garage. I wondered, did they have a kid now? Or was it someone else's? And then I saw her. Amber. She stepped out onto the porch, phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing, carefree, like she hadn't buried a husband and rewritten the script of her life. She wore a coat I recognized immediately, a soft, wool-lined green jacket. I gave it to her for Christmas 2 years before the accident. She said it was her favorite thing I'd ever picked out. She was still wearing it. I didn't linger. I walked up, slipped the envelope into the mailbox, and walked away without a word. The next morning, there was a knock at my motel door. I opened it to find her standing there. No makeup, pale, holding the photo in one shaking hand. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just stepped inside, sat down on the bed without asking, and stared at the floor. "I thought you were dead," she said finally, her voice so soft I barely heard it. "Apparently not." She looked at me, and even though my face was new, scarred, reshaped, I saw the recognition in her eyes. Somewhere, deep in her gut, she knew who I was. "I didn't know. I swear to God, Noah. I didn't know you were alive. I didn't move. But you didn't look either." Silence. "I couldn't," she said, almost choking on the words. "I was already with him, before the accident. I didn't want to. God. I didn't know how to explain it. You were gone. It felt like fate had made the decision for me." "You mean it made things easier?" She didn't answer. I stared at her, at the woman I once would have burned the world for. "You could have saved me," I said quietly. "Instead, you buried me." Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. Whatever we'd had, it had died long before I went off the road that morning. Amber stood slowly, clutched the photo to her chest, and said the only honest words I'd heard from her that day. "I don't know what to say." I nodded. "Then say nothing." After she left the motel that day, I sat in silence for a long time. The kind of silence that doesn't just settle in a room, it sinks into your skin. The heater kicked on again, clunking against the wall like it always did, but I didn't notice. All I could hear was the echo of her voice, shaky and small. I was already with him. It wasn't the words that stung. It was the way she said them. Plain. Unapologetic. Like she wasn't just confessing something painful, she was relieved to have said it aloud. To let the burden out. But it didn't fall on the floor between us. It fell on me. I should have felt rage. That was what I expected, what movies and revenge thrillers teach you to feel when you learn your wife's been sleeping with your best friend. But I didn't feel rage. I felt hollow. There's a unique kind of pain that comes not from being betrayed, but from realizing how long you were willing to ignore the signs. 3 days passed after her visit. I didn't contact her. She didn't come back. I kept to myself, worked another odd job wiring floodlights at a warehouse, and avoided the center of town. But I knew it wasn't over. Amber might have gotten her first shock, but Blake still had no idea I was back. And I wanted him to see me. Not in some dramatic, punch-throwing way. No. I wanted to see what guilt looked like on him. I got my chance sooner than I thought. I was walking past the hardware store when I saw his truck, a Navy Ford with a dented tailgate and a faded ski sticker on the bumper. Same truck he had 4 years ago. He stepped out, sunglasses on, jacket zipped to the chin. Still had that easygoing walk. Like nothing in the world could ever truly get to him. He didn't recognize me. He passed close enough that I could smell his cologne, something citrusy, the kind Amber used to say made him smell like confidence. I stopped at the crosswalk and turned toward him. He looked my way, nodded politely like you do to a stranger, and kept going. I smiled to myself. That night, I returned to their house, not with another letter, not with threats. Just to see. From a safe distance, through the trees on the edge of the property. Amber was in the living room, pacing. Her silhouette moved past the windows again and again. She looked like someone trying to figure out whether to run or confess. The porch light was on. Then I heard them. Voices. Raised. You said he was gone. Amber's voice, sharp, panicked. Blake responded, low and urgent. I didn't know he was alive. You think I planned for this? Everything we built, what if it all comes crashing down now? Then we handle it. You need to calm down. Handle it. That's how he talked about me now. A situation. A complication. I turned and walked away. Fast. Back at the motel, I found myself staring at my reflection in the dusty mirror again. The face still startled me sometimes. But in that moment, I was more aware of the eyes. My eyes. Not dead, not broken, but tired. Tired of carrying the weight of silence. Tired of being the ghost. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I drove into town and walked straight into the county records office. This time, I gave my name, my real name, to a clerk who blinked, confused. I'm listed as deceased, I told her. But I'm standing here. So, we've got a problem. What followed was a blur of paperwork, scanned documents, and conversations with legal assistants who didn't know what to do with a man who had come back from the dead. When word finally reached the insurance company, it exploded. Apparently, Amber's claim and the circumstances around it raised more than a few eyebrows. I was contacted by an investigator within 48 hours. He asked me to come in for a statement. I sat in a stark white room with fluorescent lights and told them everything from the accident to the coma to the moment I saw the real estate photo. They took notes. Asked for documents. Asked if I had reason to believe fraud had occurred. I didn't need to say yes. The trail was clear enough. That night, I returned to the motel and found a message slid under my door. No name, just Amber's handwriting. Please. One last time. I need you to hear me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We met at the edge of the lake, one of the places we used to go to clear our heads. The sun was setting, the sky a mess of gold and pink behind the hills. She was already there when I arrived, sitting on a picnic table, her arms wrapped around herself. I didn't plan it, she said as I approached. I need you to believe that. I didn't answer right away. Just watched her face. You and I were falling apart. Before the accident, she continued. You were always gone. Always working. Always chasing some new project. I was lonely and Blake, he was just there. It started small. I let the silence drag out between us. You didn't try to find me, I said quietly. Not a single phone call. Not a hospital. Not a news report. She nodded slowly. Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I searched for you, I might find you. And then I'd have to explain everything. I exhaled, steadying my voice. So you let the silence bury me. That was easier. She didn't deny it. I took a step back, suddenly aware of the wind coming off the lake. It was cold, biting. I'm not here for apologies, I said. I'm here so you understand something. You didn't K***ll me. You didn't push me off that road. But you saw a path forward without me and you took it. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't flinch. You chose silence over guilt. And now you don't get to erase that choice just because I survived it. She tried to speak again, but I turned and walked away before she could. Some things don't need a response. Some truths don't need discussion. They just sit there heavy, undeniable, and change everything. The thing about silence is it protects people. It gives them time. It gives them control. But the second I came back into the world, speaking my name with legal weight behind it, the silence shattered. And the cracks ran deep. The first sign came 2 weeks after I filed my affidavit at the county clerk's office. My death certificate, official, notarized, archived, was now under review. The phrase they used in the paperwork was status contestation. But what it really meant was, this man isn't dead and someone's going to have to answer for why we thought he was. That someone was Amber. And Blake. I got a call from a local reporter just days later. She said she'd heard rumors about a man returning from the dead and that his wife had already moved on. Her voice was careful, like she was trying to walk the line between curiosity and scandal hunting. I didn't give her much, just confirmed the basics. Yes, I had been presumed dead. Yes, I was alive. Yes, my wife had collected the insurance payout. That was enough for her. The headline hit the local news site within 24 hours. Presumed dead husband returns, wife had already started new life. The article included a blurry photo of me taken outside the courthouse and an old engagement photo of Amber and me that they'd pulled from social media. Right below it was a more recent one, Amber and Blake standing on the steps of their new studio, smiling like the world belonged to them. The irony wasn't lost on me. By the time the media caught wind of the fraud allegations, it was no longer a private disaster. Amber and Blake were suddenly the story. Tragic love triangle. Insurance fraud? Wife moves on, husband returns, what happens now? People came out of the woodwork. Neighbors. Former clients. Even people we hadn't seen in years. Some offered support. Others offered gossip. All of it felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unravel on a screen. The insurance company moved quickly once they confirmed I was alive. Their lawyers called me to arrange a formal deposition. I sat in a sterile room opposite 2 attorneys in suits sharp enough to cut glass and answered questions under oath. Did you authorize your wife to act on your behalf? No. Did you provide or consent to a power of attorney during or after your hospitalization? No. Were you aware that she liquidated your business assets and accepted the full insurance payout under your death certificate? I wasn't aware of anything. I was in a coma. They took everything down. Every word. Every pause. Every detail mattered now. Amber was served a notice of investigation within a week. She didn't show up at her first scheduled meeting. Neither did Blake. The news reported that their studio had closed for personal reasons and a handwritten sign appeared on their door, temporarily closed due to family emergency. But I'd seen the emergency. I'd heard it through the trees that night on their porch. You said he was gone. Gone. Not missing. Not dead. Just gone. I heard from a friend that Blake had cleared out the garage within days of the news breaking. His truck hadn't been seen in town since. And Amber? She filed for divorce. Not from me. From Blake. The cracks were showing and the picture-perfect life they'd built was starting to collapse under its own weight. The home they bought together, the one in the real estate window, all smiles and celebration, went up for sale. No open house. No farewell posts. Just a cold listing on a real estate site with staged photos and a contact number for a realtor I didn't recognize. I drove past once. Not to see her, but to see it. The house. Empty flower pots. A pile of mail collecting on the porch. A for sale sign with a sun-faded logo swinging in the wind. And then voices again. Inside the house, through the thin walls, I heard them. Amber. Her voice raw. You told me he wouldn't come back. And Blake angry now, bitter. I didn't know. What do you want me to say? A door slammed. Silence followed. I didn't wait to hear more. The next week, Amber showed up at the motel again. But she wasn't quiet this time. She wasn't shaking. She was furious. You humiliated me, she snapped the second I opened the door. You could have just talked to me. Privately. I leaned against the frame. We did talk. You told me the truth, remember? That you didn't look. That you didn't want to. She tossed something onto the table behind me, an envelope. Inside, old letters. Ones I'd written during our marriage. Stuff I never thought I'd see again. I found these when I was packing, she said. They reminded me who you really were. Always distant. Always obsessed with work. You were never present, Noah. You were a body in the room, but your head was always somewhere else. I flipped through the letters, recognizing my own handwriting, notes from business trips, post-it style, I love yous I'd stuck to mirrors, dashboard reminders, weekend planning scribbles. I worked because I believed in what we were building, I said. Because I trusted that you were still in it with me. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. You didn't K*LL me, Amber, I said quietly. You just decided your life would be easier if I stayed dead. She didn't respond. Just stared at the wall like it might offer an escape. And now she asked bitterly, "What do you want now, Noah? An apology? Closure?" I stepped closer, not angry, just steady. "No," I said. "I want you to live with the truth. Every single day. I want you to wake up knowing exactly what you did, not just to me, but to yourself." She blinked, tears threatening, but this time I didn't care. "Don't run from it," I added. "Sit with it." Like I had to. A week later, she was gone. Blake too. No one in town knew where they went. Their life, the one they built on my disappearance, was gone like it had never existed. The studio shut down permanently. The house eventually sold. Their names faded from small-town memory faster than I expected. And me? I stayed behind for a while. Not to gloat. Not to watch them leave. But because I needed to see the whole thing fall. Quietly. Completely. Without fanfare. Because I wasn't the ghost anymore. I was the witness. It was quiet after Amber left town. That's the part no one tells you about revenge or justice or whatever word people like to use when the truth finally breaks through. The aftermath is silent. Not satisfying. Not triumphant. Just quiet. But one last storm rolled through before everything finally settled. Amber came back. Not for long, just one day. She showed up again at the motel. No knock this time. Just a soft thud as an envelope slid under my door. I stared at it for a while before picking it up. Inside were three things: a folded letter, a photo of our wedding day, and a return address scratched on a post-it with the words, "In case you ever want answers." I didn't read the letter at first. I left it sealed on the nightstand while I walked to the gas station across the street, bought a bad cup of coffee, and sat outside in the cold. When I came back, I finally opened it. It wasn't long. She said she wasn't asking for forgiveness. Said she knew she didn't deserve it. But she couldn't leave things the way they were. And then came the line that stuck with me longer than I wanted it to. "You were never really here. Even when you were." That made it easier. I folded the letter and set it down. Later that day, she showed up in person. She stood by the motel stairwell, arms crossed, coat pulled tight around her. Same one I gave her years ago. The green one. I stepped outside, half expecting some new wave of guilt, or confession, or bargaining. But there was none of that. She just looked tired. "Blake's gone," she said flatly. "He left the morning after you confronted me. Said he didn't sign up for this kind of mess." I didn't say anything. Just waited. "I lost everything," she continued. "The studio. The house. Friends. Even my parents won't talk to me." Still, I waited. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "You win, Noah. Okay? You got what you wanted. Everyone knows the truth now." That got a small reaction from me. A laugh, not loud, not cruel. Just a breath of disbelief. "This wasn't about winning," I said. "There's no scoreboard in betrayal." She looked away, then back. "So what do you want?" I met her eyes and let the words come slow. "For you to live with what you did. Not hide from it. Not rewrite it. Live with it." She nodded once, like she'd expected that. And then she walked away.